said in one of his concerts, he said, well, we're recording now, so if you're going to say something, say it well, or anyway. He said it better. He has a better voice, of course. So we're going to talk a little bit about trade, and it comes up again later in the semester, dressed up with all the graphs and stuff, like the one we barely sort of touched upon for supply and demand. But we're going to just get into some of the basic principles here in this chapter. And as always, it's not a spoon-feeding session to save you from having to read the chapter. It's a clarifying what I think and what you tell me most needs clarification. No, there's that Cajun thing. Clarification. Yeah, clarification. So do be assertive, and thank you so much for those of you who do actually provide the feedback, because you benefit me and everybody else. And keep up the good work on your end. Okay, and we're on Top Hat here, and I made a bunch of questions. 6, so we'll do those. And speaking of Top Hat, supposed to go to the left end of the screen. Well, let's see. There it is. Let's try this, even though, this is, I understand that some of you haven't signed up yet. See, there's the code, right? But let's try this in 30 seconds time. Do this. Okay, maybe a little more than 30 seconds today. But that'll register that you're here, and we're going to do this every period, about 5 or 6 minutes in. Okay, so you can either do it on your laptop or your tablet or whatever, or text to that number that's on your screen there. I still see the bar moving, so some of you are still going, oh, what, do what? Dial what? And text, yeah, I know it's new. It's not a big deal, though. And thank goodness for it, because it's the old school way of taking attendance is just not, has too high an opportunity cost. All right, so going once, going twice. You will not be registered as here once I click this button, if you haven't already. Yes?
Sir, I'm turning on my phone right now.
Oh.
I'm trying to see if I get reception, because when I'm really sleeping in this room, I don't get reception.
Okay. Well, see, that's why we're doing this, is to get people to bring the right device, the one that does work in here, because otherwise, whatever device you have is going to be... Yes.
What are we supposed to text?
That number. I don't know. I don't text. I'm such a dinosaur. I don't even know what texting is or does. That number, those 4 digit, 2606. That's what you're supposed to text. Okay, good. We got some more people connecting there. Again, today is not, it's just practice. So no tension needed. But yeah, next time we need to have ironed out the little bit of kinks that are here. 82%, that's pretty good. That's pretty good on any day. All right, going one. Normally about 30 seconds, and not right at 8 o'clock, parking, other issues, but pretty close. I mean, not 8 o'clock, 8:30. Sorry, old school. I'm used to the first session of the day being at 8 to 9:15, not 8:30 to 9:45. Okay, good enough. If you didn't get recorded for today, no problem. Oops. All right, so back to, how do you undo the attendance? See, that's what I need to learn. Okay, there we go. Maybe try that X right there. Good, okay. So download the PowerPoint, open with that. Okay, and I'll figure out how to go back and forth between this and the questions as we get to them. All right. The power of trade and comparative advantage. Trade is powerful for these reasons. We don't all agree. What does that mean? We don't all agree on things. Well, let's suppose that we have a war going and everybody gets rationing coupons because we can't, during a war we have to use most of the stuff for the military and we have to be constrained to have pretty much bare minimum survival stuff. But still there's going to be some diversity of what's available. And so trade occurs. People trade coupons for different things because they have different preferences and different life I always want to use the N word because it's so easy to say, need, but don't. Wants and desires. Okay? But I know you wanted to think it, yeah, we all have different needs. No, we almost all have about the same things that are true needs. And then beyond that, we have very diverse wants and desires. Right? Needs are things like minimal amounts of water, okay? Food, shelter, those sorts of things. Very general things. But the specific things that you actually purchase are not generally needs because they all have, almost all of them have consumption substitutes. Now, if you have some medical issues, certain medicines may be needs, yes. Okay, but mostly wants. Avoid the N word. The N word, need, is indeed a 4-letter word because it deadens your brain. Yes, it's convenient, and yes, when you say it, usually you really do mean wants and desires. Think about it if price matters. It's not a need, right? If it's a need, you're gonna do whatever it takes to meet it. Okay? Mortgage your house, whatever. Find the money. If it's a need, you're going to do it. Now, need is a quantity thing sometimes. In other words, we do need some liquid every day, water or something that has water in it. But when the politicians often talk about the water needs, they're talking about the average consumption in a city of over 100 gallons per person per day. Is that a need? No. After, let's say it's a nice round 100. After about the first gallon, it's not a need. It's a want or a desire. Yeah, the first gallon for your bodily functions, sure. And, cooking and cleaning, yeah, that's pretty strong want or desire. But still, price is high enough, you'd figure out a way to do with less. Okay? So, anyway, trade and preferences is an issue because we have different wants and desires. Not too many different needs. All right, so that's one of the reasons we trade is because we like different stuff. Another way to is translation in action. Another reason, and probably the biggest reason of all, is because when we specialize, we learn a lot more stuff. And when we specialize, as we all do, remember one of the ways to study economics is to study yourself. We all specialize in certain things and then purchase the vast majority of things we consume from others, right? The vast majority of the things that we use, others produced. And so we trade what we produce, okay, what we specialize in, for those other things, indirectly through money, right? The money is the nice medium by which we are able to do that easily. So, without trade, there is no specialization. If you can't swap with other people, okay, then you've got to meet all your own wants and needs. And then we often know the same things. And then we're all really poor. Okay? Once you can specialize, if you can trade, if there's money by which to do that, because without money it's very difficult to trade. How would you trade directly what you do for what I do? Indirectly, no problem, right? You pay your tuition and fees, and the little key gets turned in my back, and I start doing my thing because I'll get a paycheck. But directly, let's say you wait on tables at a restaurant. Okay, so I talk for 5 minutes, and then you wait on me at the restaurant. No, I don't want to listen to you for 5 minutes. Okay? Direct trade, called barter, is very, very awkward. That's why we have money, in order to trade indirectly. Most things we like to do directly, but not trade. Trade we want to do indirectly through money. Okay, so trade through money allows specialization, and when we specialize in something, what do we naturally specialize in? What we're best at. When everybody doing what they're best at, the total amount of stuff available is a lot more than if we all had to do a bunch of stuff that we're not very good at. Right? If I had to fix plumbing and tune up my car and all that other, and make the car and build the house, all of that, and I had to have some menial skills to figure all that out, the house would not look very good, it would not be very big, it would fall down a lot, the car would not run very well, because those are things I'm not good at. Well, maybe if I tried hard enough, but I couldn't be good at all of them. Okay, so I focus on something that I think I'm pretty good at, and I get money and I trade for the car mechanic and the plumber and the carpenter and all the other people that are specializing in what they do best. See, and that's what comparative advantage is all about. We specialize in something that we may not be the best in the world at, but where our opportunity costs are lowest. Again, study yourself to think about this. Why do you do what you do? Because what you give up to do it is the smallest of your choices. What do I give up to be an economist? Well, the income that I could make from, say, stonemasonry. Why'd I pick that? Well, because I goof around with that a little bit in my off time. Remember that Quikrete example, that concrete example? Yeah, I buy Quikrete and I collect granite scraps from I won't tell you where it is because then we'll be in competition. But anyway, there's places that do stuff with granite, for countertops and stuff, and they have junk left over from, and I collect it. And so maybe that would be my alternative. Maybe I would be a stonemason if I wasn't an economist, making these stepping stones and walls and other things that I make when I don't feel like doing what I do now. I'm trying to think, how much money would I make doing that? How much, given how fast I am at it and how good it looks. I'm not giving up very much being an economist. I'm proud of my stonemason work. I think it looks cool. Is there much of a market for it? Would other people think it's cool enough to spend a lot of money on it? I don't think so. So, by being an economist and therefore giving up making a living at stonemasonry, I don't give up very much. There's a low opportunity cost to be an economist. However, you flip that over, if I were to be the stonemason, I would give up doing this, and it pays pretty well, and I enjoy it, so I would give that up too. That's part of the opportunity cost is giving up the fact that I enjoy doing it. So being a stonemason has a huge opportunity cost, and therefore I choose not to do it other than as a recreational sort of hobby thing on the side. Okay? So comparative advantage is about opportunity cost. Your comparative advantage is where your opportunity cost is lowest, where what you do gives up the least in terms of other things that you value, income, enjoyment of the work, etc. Remember, opportunity cost is not just a money price tag. It's the whole package. It's complete. It's forward-looking. Okay, the room is quiet. It means I have your attention maybe, or it means, whoa, lots of jargon. I'm floored. I'm devastated. Anyway. So, because I do ramble, okay, and some of you are still in stenographic mode, and I don't want you to freak out. I'll kind of back off on it a little bit and give you a chance to catch up. But maybe while some of you are doing that, let me remake the suggestion that I made last time. These PowerPoints are available. There's no reason to write down what they say. There is a thing in PowerPoint, what is it, under View or something, I can't remember where it is, where you can put 3 slides on one side of the page and then blank lines to write in on the other side of the page. Do that. Because, see, then you don't have to write down what the PowerPoint slides say, but you can make little arrows and stuff and take notes and say, oh, this is what comparative advantage means, because just looking at the word and memorizing doesn't do squat for you, right? You need to understand what it means. You may need clarification. And I may have succeeded at that without you raising your hand and asking for it. And that's when you make a little scribble on the one side of the page where you left some blank space. Make an arrow. Oh, comparative advantage, that's about opportunity cost. And here's what opportunity cost means. It means you're giving up something to do what you are doing. And comparative advantage means lowest opportunity cost. So it means you pick to do what gives up the least. Okay? Like I give up stonemasonry to be an economist. And in terms of income, I ain't giving up much. I'm giving up some fun because I enjoy it. But so that's another issue. I enjoy it for a few hours a week every now and then. Would I enjoy it for 40 hours a week or more? I don't know. My hands get dry from the concrete and dusty, and I can handle that every so often. So in small doses, I think it's fun. But I want to make a living at it. See, that's all part of that opportunity cost thing, is all of those considerations of, yeah, at this scale, cool. Scale it up to 40 hours a week? Nah. No thanks. Okay, so quantity matters. Just like that water example. Yeah, it's a need for about 1 gallon a day. For 100 gallons a day, no. The other 99 are wants. Water the lawn, wash the car, take that long shower, all of that stuff. Those are wants and desires. And if water was more expensive, we wouldn't use 100 gallons per. It's more than that actually in most cities. It's hard to believe. That doesn't include just your direct use. That includes the water that goes into the goods and services that you purchase, that you indirectly use. But still, even the direct use is pretty substantial. Okay, so and then power of trade is even more powerful when it goes on globally, because the opportunity costs differ more the greater the differences between the traders, whether the traders are countries or people or whatever. Think about that a little bit. Let's see. The gains from trade are bigger, the bigger the differences in opportunity cost, yes. So that means the countries, thinking in terms of global, countries gain the most by trading when they differ the most. Many a politician has said, yeah, no, we can't trade with Zimbabwe. Remember the little boy with the $1 billion? No, we can't trade with, and think of some other country that's really different from us because other labor's too cheap or something like that. Remember Ross Perot? Most of you were born after he made his statements about that in the 1992 campaign. Ross Perot was a great patriot, but he had a misunderstanding about trade, namely that we couldn't compete with countries with cheap labor. Why is their labor cheap? Low opportunity costs. Okay, so if trade is based on differences in comparative advantage, based on comparative advantage, which is based on differences in opportunity cost, the biggest gains from trade will be between the countries that are the most different, not the ones that are the most similar. Okay? Sometimes politicians, including Ross Perot for a little while, wanted to put up barriers to trade based on differences in wage levels. And Al Gore, bless his heart, debating Ross Perot in the 1992 presidential campaign, said, when Ross Perot made this statement about we need to put up tariffs according to wage differences, tariffs or trade barriers, taxes on imports. And Al Gore, vice president, running. Was it the 92 campaign? Anyway, he was vice president from 1992 to 2000, presidential candidate. Al Gore was in 2000. Anyway, he looked at Ross Perot and he said, you want to tax people for being poor? That's right, think about that. A tariff, a tax on imports based on the differences between U.S. wages and some other country's wages, whatever they are, is going to be bigger the poorer they are compared to us. So that's exactly what that kind of a trade barrier means, is taxing people for being poor. The poorer they are, the bigger the barrier to them being able to sell their goods here. Right, which is exactly the wrong thing to do because trade, the gains from trade, the power of trade, is based on differences in opportunity cost. And the differences in opportunity cost between, say, U.S. and Mexico are much different, much bigger than, say, the differences in opportunity cost between the U.S. and Canada. We're a lot more like Canada than we are like Mexico. So, no, we don't want to put up a trade barrier to trade with Mexico based on the differences between U.S. average wage and the Mexican average wage. No, free trade. Okay? Anything that interferes with trade undermines these things. Trading according to differences in tastes and preferences. Trading according to differences in opportunity cost. And makes us poor as a result. Okay, and then probably the main argument for why trade is great is because it's voluntary and people do it because they think it'll make them better off. And that's, every time you've traded, that's what you thought. You may have decided later, whoops. But at the time, at least, you thought, that candy bar, it talks about candy bar up there in case you haven't read that far to it because you're listening to me ramble. That candy bar for $1, was preferred to what else you thought you might spend that dollar on. This slide, which maybe I should have edited a little bit more than I did, doesn't get into that. It just says you prefer the candy bar to having a dollar bill sitting in your pocket. No, that's incomplete. You prefer the candy bar to what else you think you can buy with the dollar, because what good is a piece of green paper sitting in your pocket doing? It represents purchasing power. And you want to allocate it to the highest valued use, right? And so you buy the candy bar, you imply that you think that's the highest valued use of at least one of your dollars. Okay? And think about the candy bar. How much would it have cost you to make that candy bar? How about that pencil? How much would it cost you to make that pencil that you bought, for a dime or a nickel or whatever? I haven't purchased a pencil in a while. A phenomenal amount, right? But for 5 to 10 cents of your work, you can just go out and buy one, which means you turn the task over to somebody else of making the pencil. And they said, there's pretty good demand for pencils. I'll make 1 million of them. And economies of scale, right? That's another part of trade, is if everybody makes pencils, boy, that's really expensive for them to devote the time and effort and, to do the wood and that little graphite in it and everything. There's a lot of work. But if one person or a few people mass produce pencils, then the opportunity cost is really low. And then we trade, right, so that we can have some pencils along with all the other things we'd like. Again, just a little pause here to give you a chance to catch up mentally and see if you need clarification on anything. I looked at well, it's not up here, but anyway, I looked at the little presentation last time they're recording, and I need to get a little more animated. And maybe I need brighter colored clothes too. This seems to wash out. I'm looking at my screen here that's showing what I look like on it. It doesn't even show this tie very well. I need to pull out my Rush Limbaugh ties. It's not political. He used to be in the tie business, back in the 1990s. He had colorful ties, and I have some of them. And I'm somewhat known for my zany ties. I don't know what it is that possessed me to pick that up. It's just feeling patriotic today, I guess. Just there it was in the closet, grabbed it. Okay, so I stalled here. That was my stall tactic. Okay, because I don't want you to say, "Well, he just flies through this stuff, and I don't even have time to think of any questions." No, it's not true. Right now you can ignore the blather about the tie and Rush Limbaugh and all that stuff, and it's hard to stop the jaw from flapping sometimes. Stay animated. But that's your time to ponder whether you really did get all of what you did. And we're going to use the top hat in a minute as the kind of the acid test, because I'm going to go through stuff that a lot of you are just going to sit on your hands about, which is not good. You won't understand it because there's some nasty stuff here a couple slides down the road with some numbers that you got to process. And then we'll get into the question, and we'll see that half of you didn't get it. You sat on your hands and you had no idea. Why? Don't do it for this or anything else. Fragile ego or whatever it is that's going on is a serious learning disability. In other words, fear of raising your hand physically here or electronically online is very costly, right? If you don't understand something, that's the reason why we meet. We don't need to meet for any other reason, right? It's all in the book. It's a nicely written book, right? If you can get it just by reading it, great. You have other things to do, other places to be. Treat it like an online class. I have no problem with that at all. I want a few of you in here to talk to because, it's an ego thing to have an audience, and make people listen to you or hopefully willingly listen. But on a one-on-one, one-for-one basis, if you're getting it without me blathering or, can't stand it for whatever reason, hey, treat it like an online class. I'm a bottom line guy. If you're getting it, whatever way works. See, that was that thing in that email, too. What's the required material for this course? The stuff that works for you to get the basic ideas in the book. Okay, so I throw a lot of stuff on the internet and get emails that say, is this required? I say, I don't know. If you look at it and it doesn't help you learn the material, no, it's not required. If you look at it and it's helping you clarify things, then it is required. Okay, now, of course, the textbook, that's required. That conveys the material. But then all the things that might help you grasp it. That's for you to decide whether it helps, and that includes visiting me. Okay, now, there may be a lot of you, but I'm still eager to see as many of you as are likely to come, given your other things that you have to do and be. I'd love to have you come upstairs and say hello. Okay, so I think we've covered this slide already, and to blather about the first slide. Okay, so I'm saying okay with a question mark behind it. And not a hand up means, yes, Doc, it's okay, move on. Okay, so with no trade, no specialization, disaster, caveman, cavewoman, poor, poverty, right? Trade and specialization, that's the biggie. Yes, it's nice because we have different preferences to be able to swap those rationing coupons and whatever. Okay, great, but the bottom line, the biggie, is the trade facilitates specialization. Okay? Almost all of you, I suspect, specialize in the production of a single good, or like if you work at a restaurant, a menu of goods, okay, or a grocery store, and then you trade for everything else. Right? The vast majority of stuff that you consume is produced by someone else. It's true for almost all of us. That's trade in action. Okay, we can produce more through, okay, yeah. Okay, I think we covered that. And Bensel thing about selling large quantities. Okay. And, as the authors of the book point out, if we all had to just meet our own wants and desires, and which means if there was no possibility for trade, or if that breaks down, remember the little boy with the $1 billion? Trade is going to break down if it hasn't already started to under those circumstances because of inflation. People are not going to trust that money to hold value long enough for them to spend it, for them to accept it in payment. At least not very much longer. Plus, the poor little boy is probably, his back is going to be broken at that inflation rate. The bills that he's going to have to carry in a couple of hours. I think what it said under the picture was the inflation rate in Zimbabwe was several thousand% a day or something like that. That means this pile of bills in a couple of days is a pile this big to buy the same thing. Okay? So, under those circumstances, barter is the only way that people trade, and barter is very, very awkward. Here's a bit of jargon. You need a double coincidence of wants for barter to work. In other words, they need to want what you have at the same time that you need to want what they have. Okay, so trade with you and I means you need to want to hear me lecture on economics at the same exact time that I want whatever it is that you do for a living. That double coincidence doesn't happen very much. Okay, and so the knowledge issue is once we start specializing, then the sum total knowledge in society is vastly more. It says more than in a different page. Okay, somewhere else. Anyway, it says somewhere that sum total knowledge is way more than a single brain can handle. No, I don't buy that. Most of our brains are way underutilized, but it's the combined knowledge of society is way more than most individuals do actually know and are likely to actually know given their utilization of their brain capacity. Okay, so and see, that's the beauty of the price system. That one number, the price of something, conveys a massive amount of information, very economically, very efficiently, and very powerfully. Because it tells us, hey, if you don't value this good, at least at that price, step aside and let somebody else buy it. Because this is the prevailing price and other people are willing to pay that price for it. The price rises up or down to separate those who want it the most from those who don't want it so bad. Yeah, most things aren't needs. It is a want issue. Yeah, there's a few things, yes, that are needs, and most of them only in small quantities. Okay, and then on the production side, the going rate, the prevailing price of something says, hey, if you can produce it for less than this price, you're going to make a profit and go for it. If you can't, step aside and let somebody else produce it, and if you want it, buy it from them. Okay, so the price system conveys a massive amount of information that coordinates economic activity. See, most of production occurs through what's called decentralized planning through the price system. Decentralized planning, whoa. Yeah. Centralized planning is a disaster. If you ever want to talk about that, as many of you are in business or College of Business, you want to talk about that at a party or something or with somebody else and they're just not getting it, maybe they're a visual person, do this. Google Korea at night. You'll get a satellite photo. It's unbelievable. North and South Korea, identical culturally and everything. I mean, it's a perfect experiment. And there's the border there that resulted from the Korean War in the 50s. The northern half of Korea at night from space is black. There's one little dot there at Pyongyang, the capital. I guess there's one light on in North Korea at night. The fishing boats in the ocean between Japan and Korea are more brightly lit than is all of North Korea other than that little dot at Pyongyang, the capital. South Korea looks like a Christmas tree. Almost the whole piece of that bottom part of the peninsula is brightly lit. And the environmentalists, and you might say, well, that's very inefficient. They're much more efficient. No. It's a measure of poverty. Okay? North Korea centrally plans their economy. Okay? In other words, the government, through anointed experts, decide what's going to be produced, how it's going to be produced, where it's going to be produced, and how to distribute it, who gets it. Remember the what, how, and for whom? Those are the basic economic questions. And the South is a decentrally planned system, which means it's free enterprise that decides what gets produced and how, and then the price system orchestrates all of that. And that's why in that slideshow we began at the end of the last period, but we're deferring, where it says right at the beginning, one of the first slides, don't mess with no, it doesn't say that. Don't mess with supply and demand. Don't interfere with it. It has serious consequences. Yeah, because that's what the North Koreans did. Says, nah, we're not going to let the market do that. We're going to decide that in a government bureau in Pyongyang. All those things. No, in South Korea, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to let supply and demand and free enterprise and whatever somebody thinks they can make money at produce. And if they can't, they'll go bankrupt. And if they get rich, great. And then people will have to shop among those things that the entrepreneurs are offering. That's the South. South Korea, which is booming. Okay? Brightly lit, not in the Stone Age like North Korea and Cuba and a few other places that are centrally planned. And by the way, we are not any better at centrally planning things than the Cubans and the North Koreans are. Just because we have a non-dictatorial system doesn't make us smarter about centrally deciding what, how, and for whom, what gets produced, how it gets produced, and where. We can see that through our school system because it's centrally planned. You may not have heard of Nation at Risk. That's something else to Google. But our K-12 school system is seen as so inefficient, so bad, so low performing, that about every 4 or 5 years, some authoritative, nonpartisan group of experts says that we're placing our nation's future at risk by relying on this system to produce our educated adults. Google that sometime, Nation at Risk. It starts with a 1983 report, and it continues through this day. I'll send you some stuff if you're interested, because that's school system reform is one of the things that I do in my non-teaching part of my professorship. Okay. All right, so let's see. See, when I sort of ramble, try to be a little more animated, I run ahead some of these slides. I'm looking at this slide thinking, did I cover this? I think so. Yeah. World trade, specializations by country, right, is an opportunity to increase the division of knowledge and increase specialization and therefore increase world output of goods and services. Make us all potentially better off because, of course, it also depends on how they're distributed, right? It's one thing to have more stuff. And it says, well, wait a minute, okay, great, we've got more stuff. What's my share? What's my piece of that pie? I like the pie being bigger, yeah. But tell me what my piece of it is. Because there's a lot of places in the world where the leaders are making conscious decisions because they're sort of corrupt. It says, these things we could do to expand the size of the pie, the GDP of our country, we're not going to do it because that would reduce the elite people, the power structure, share of the total. And a lot of countries, including still Mexico and much more so a few years ago than now, is there were a lot of government-created monopolies, which made a few people really, really rich. Now, to make the country more prosperous, they have to get rid of some of those. Well, the people that run and own those monopolies, that would make them poor, right? So, hey, human nature, they're saying, no, they've invent all kinds of reasons. No, not a good idea. No, don't do that. No, I like being a gazillionaire, or I think the world's richest man, Carlos Slim, in Mexico. Okay? How do you think he got so rich? He's got a monopoly on some stuff. Okay? And he doesn't keep those monopolies out of just sheer luck. The government sort of protects him from possible competitors. Not directly, I don't think anymore, but indirectly. Which works just fine if it works, right? If you have a monopoly, it says, I don't care how you keep others out of my business and keep me the only seller of it, just do it, right? Campaign contributions and other things to get the politicians to go along. Most monopolies are not very durable. We'll talk about that later on in the semester. Most monopolies, once you start raking in the bucks, somebody's going to jump in and compete against you, if they can. And the only way that typically they can't is if the government, through various restrictions, keeps them out. So when you see monopoly abuses, probably somewhere is some backroom shenanigans that keeps the government as an active agent of entry barriers, keeps others from entering that market. Okay, And part of comparative advantage, as it says in this slide, is that countries are physically different. There are not many places in the United States that grow coffee or bananas, at least not en masse and not very well. So there are places where they are, the tropical countries where that's possible. So we trade with them. That's one of the reasons we trade with them, is we just don't have the physical conditions to produce those things with low opportunity cost. We could produce tons of bananas and coffee if we wanted to here. Greenhouses. Oh, that's expensive. It's much cheaper to let somebody else do it, open air, down in the tropics. But we could, just with a phenomenal opportunity cost. Man, people have, a lot of people are coffee addicts, right? They'd fork over the bucks to buy the coffee at the high price if they had to. You may have looked at that chapter on supply and demand. That's the basis of consumer surplus. They want it really bad, and because we trade with people to get it, it's really cheap, and they're, wow, cool. Yeah, but if it was expensive, because we didn't allow trade, and we had to make it ourselves, they probably still would buy it. It just would cost more, and it would yield them less consumer surplus. Consumer surplus, that's the difference between what it's worth to them and what they have to pay to buy it. Pencil would not have much consumer surplus for me if I had to make it myself, because I'm expensive. I don't know how I'd do it. What tools to make individual, make the lead, and anyway. But in mass, no problem. Somebody else can do it with low opportunity cost. Okay, now here's an important distinction to make. There's a lot of little nuances coming up here. There's absolute advantage, there's comparative advantage, and there are differences. And politicians obviously get these confused a lot because, see, that's the basis of this nonsense about we can't trade with some people because they're really different from us, which is exactly the opposite of the truth. Because there are cases where the United States has the absolute advantage. In other words, we're more efficient at producing things. So why should we trade with somebody that's less efficient at producing the same good? Because of comparative advantage. That's like, why should a brain surgeon that's really good at typing not have somebody else do his typing? Maybe he's the world's best typer, has a gold medal in typing, but yet he pays somebody else, or she pays somebody else to do the typing. Well, it's opportunity cost. Every minute spent typing up stuff is less time studying and doing brain surgery, which pays a lot more than typing does. Okay, so it's the same thing. We might have an absolute advantage, as it says that, there's the definition for you to read. Now, we might be more efficient at something, but it still might make sense for us to step aside and let somebody else do it for us. Okay, like the brain surgeon hires a typist. Okay, even though they may be, because their fingers are really good at surgery, they might be also better in an absolute sense, more words per minute, than the person that they hired to do the typing. Okay, and absolute advantage, while it's significant in terms of more productive is good because then you have more stuff to keep or more stuff to trade and get stuff back for. It's not the basis of trade. The basis of trade is, as I've been telling, differences in opportunity cost, comparative advantage. So don't get those confused. Absolute advantage is not the basis for who trades what to whom. Comparative advantage is. Now, absolute advantage it definitely determines how much you have to either keep or trade, right? Absolute advantage determines how much your resources can produce, but it doesn't. Comparative advantage, opportunity cost, is the basis of, we're going to specialize in this and let somebody else make that and we'll trade for it. We'll clarify that through the numbers, but if it doesn't happen, you raise your hand and say so. Okay? That's why we're going to use the numbers to clarify some of these concepts. Okay, so here's some numbers, okay? U.S., Mexico, made up numbers. These are not based on research. These are just, suppose these are the numbers. Let's use them to illustrate things. So a computer in Mexico takes 12 units of labor. And a shirt, each one, takes 2 units of labor. So we can identify opportunity cost, right? 6 to 1. Takes 6 shirts is the cost of 1 computer. Right? I know there's some people that don't get that. 2 units of labor, so right, if we had 12 units of labor, we could have 6 shirts, right? Okay, so 6 shirts and 1 computer are equal in terms of cost. Okay, 6 to 1. See, I'm going to present these kinds of numbers in several different forms, but what always matters is the ratio. except when you're doing absolute advantage. And so let's do that first, since that's what's up on the screen here. Pretty plain that if you only take 1 unit of labor to make a computer and somebody else that takes them 12 units, you have an absolute advantage, right? Right? You're more efficient. You get more bang for the buck. Okay, so the U.S. has the absolute, I almost said comparative advantage. So you got to be careful. Absolute advantage making computers. It only takes us 1 person to make a computer. It takes them 12. Okay, and we apparently have the absolute advantage in shirts too. So just close the borders. We're better at making shirts and computers. Who needs Mexico? No. See, because we'll prove with numbers that even though we have the absolute advantage in both of the 2 industries there, that there is the basis for gains from trade. Okay, comparative advantage, differences in opportunity cost. See, the opportunity cost for the U.S. is 1-to-1, right? Which either way, one of these for one of those. Right? Every time somebody makes a computer, they give it up making a shirt. Right? Because it takes the same amount of labor. They're making computers, they're not making shirts. That's the opportunity cost idea. In Mexico, if you take 12 units of labor to make a computer, could have used that to make 6 shirts. Okay? So 6-to-1 rate. I'm using the N word. You need to see that, or you need to formulate a question. If you're too frightened to do it in front of everybody else because you think, wow, everybody else gets it because their hand's not up, no, I guarantee that's not a fact. Then do it online. Do it somewhere. Okay? Because when you get lost early, just like driving somewhere, if you get lost early, you get more and more lost the further, the more time passes. Okay. So as the slide says, the U.S. has an absolute advantage in the production of both goods. And as I've been repeating multiple times, comparative advantage is about opportunity cost comparison. Okay, so let's look at that. Same numbers. Okay, so let's just, because 12 and 2 and, multiplies to be 24, and 24 is sort of a common denominator, it says in the middle there, assume each country has 24 units of labor. So let me, so I don't flip back and forth between devices there, between screens. Let me just make some production possibilities frontiers. Okay, so with 24 units of labor, keep this in mind. And let's make sure I copy the right set of numbers down. Right, okay, so this is Mexico, and this is 12. Now, the reason that I drew a line here, let's call this the production possibility frontier with 24 workers. Don't forget that it's with, or you'll be confused later on. I don't know, 12, where'd that come from? 24 workers, given the upper table about the units of labor that it takes to make a computer versus a shirt. Well, so another production possibility here, one of many, and probably something in the neighborhood of what will be chosen. If there's no trade, they want both shirts and computers, right? Okay, so they might pick, with their 24 workers, to make 1 computer with 12 workers, and then the other 12 workers to make 6 shirts. But anyway, every point on this frontier is a production possibility. Now, for those of you who've taken macro or for whatever reason otherwise taken economics, you may think, wait a minute, doesn't a PPF look like this? Yes, it does. Okay, because on a large scale, there are increasing opportunity costs, which gives this line this bend to it. But for our purposes, we'll just assume that the opportunity costs are constant, not increasing. That's the difference between this shape that you may have seen before and the one that we're using today. Okay, and then for the U.S., we'll be over here. Okay, oops, here we go, the shirts over here. Always protest unlabeled graphs. Computers, shirts, and let's see what it is. 24, duh, okay. And again, with 24 workers. Okay, so in the U.S., if they didn't trade, probably want some computers. Probably pick something in the middle there. Okay, some shirts and some computers. All right. Why they produced two versions of the same slide with the one line missing, I don't know. I could have deleted it, I guess. Anyway, so there we are. All right. So, let's see. Should I go to some of the top hat questions yet? In a minute. Okay, so first of all, let's decide who should specialize in what and who should trade what to whom. And boy, if you're really far along, at what approximate rate they will trade. Who has the comparative advantage in shirts? Who has the comparative advantage in computers? See, and what ultimately results is, from that calculation, is that Mexico will produce either, for 24 workers, either produce 2 computers and no shirts, or, depending on comparative advantage, Mexico will produce 12 shirts with 24 workers and then no computers, and then trade, and you'll discover that something like this happens. Let me think here. Yeah. Now, this particular phrase isn't in the book. I coined it myself. Here's your ability to produce with 24 workers. And then based on that terms of trade, which I said, well, what approximate swapping terms is there going to be? Based on that, there's going to be a consumption possibilities frontier that shares only one. I mean, you can always consume exactly what it is you produce, but with trade, it's almost magic. With trade, you can consume at a level that's above the level that you're capable of producing. And everybody in the world can do it at the same time. We'll see how in a minute. Okay, but that's in the U.S. I kind of gave it away. Well, anyway, just in case I didn't give it away, you didn't figure it out. Come on, somebody, this is interactive. Who has the comparative advantage in producing shirts and why? Compare opportunity costs. What does Mexico give up to produce a shirt? Yes?
One shirt.
No, what do they give up to produce a shirt?
Computers.
How many?
For one shirt.
For one shirt.
That would be 6 computers.
Huh? 1/6 of a computer. Always answer a question assertively. Because if you're right, no one will believe you, right? If it's unassertively. So you might as well get credit for being right when you are, right? And if you're wrong, it won't matter either way, right? Okay, so indeed, yeah. Making a shirt takes the same amount of labor time as 1/6 of a computer in Mexico. So that's what it costs. In other words, Mexico is so bad at making computers, so inefficient at making computers, that they only have to give up 1/6 of the effort to make a computer to come up with a shirt. Pretty, not much of a cost, right? The same as that stonemasonry story that I gave for myself. I would not earn much income being a stonemason. So doing this for a living means I don't give up a whole heck of a lot of income doing something else. Okay, making shirts in Mexico, they're not going to give up very much. It's 1/6 of one, because it takes them a long time to make a lot of labor to make a computer. Okay, how about in the U.S.? What do they give up to make a shirt? One computer. Okay, who has the low opportunity cost? This is not advanced math. The numbers are not big. Compare 1 and 1/6, which is smaller. It's a tough one. 1/6 is smaller than 1 the last time I checked. Oh, right there. Wisdom imparted by the professor. 1/6 is smaller than 1. Ooh, I didn't know that. I learned that in my economics. I'm just clowning around. See, what I'm making fun of is the tension. Oh, this is so hard. No, it's not. Okay? But you make it harder if you assume that it is, or you're frightened by it, or, oh, these are new words. This must be written. No, you can make it as hard or as easy as you want to make it just by your can-do. Hey, this is pretty easy. Think positive. Maybe at some point, oh, wow, that wasn't as easy as I thought. But most of the time, it is as easy as it looks, if it does, or even easier than it looks if it doesn't. Yes. No, Mexico has the comparative advantage. Their opportunity. Yeah, see, that's what I said. I said, oops, I gave it away. Right? I did that by drawing the CPF connected here, because that's what will happen. Because Mexico will specialize in shirt making because that's where their opportunity cost is lowest. That's exactly right. The U.S. is going to be on this side. And let me put something else up here and then explain it. The approximate likely swapping terms. Approximate likely. We can't say exactly what they are because that comes down to negotiating skill and all that. But the swapping terms always have to be feasible for rational people to agree to them. The swapping terms of the rate at which you swap computers for shirts, or shirts for computers, has to be between the opportunity costs. Okay, so what's between 1/6 and 1/3? Right, kind of halfway between. Another way to look at it is look the other way. It's easier, not to do with fractions. 6 shirts per computer, right? In Mexico, 1 shirt per computer in the U.S. What's between 6 and 1? Kind of halfway. 3. Okay, so if the established trading terms is 3 shirts for 1 computer, Mexico could, if they traded all their shirts away, get 4 computers, right? 3-to-1 rate, 3 shirts per 1 computer means 4 computers are equal in trade to 12 shirts. See, you see the magic? That doesn't mean they have to do that. That's just that's the most extreme production. But now they can pick something like this. Okay? The same amount of shirts and twice as many computers as before through trade. By specializing in shirts and trading at a rate that's attractive to the U.S. as well as Mexico. See, that's what I mean to be feasible. To be feasible, both sides have to say, yes, deal, thank you very much, happy with it. Both sides have to benefit from it. Okay, so it could be 4-to-1 would work, 2-to-1 would work, but right in the middle is 3-to-1. Has to be between 6-to-1 and 1-to-1. Okay, for both sides. Now you agree that Mexico would be very thrilled to trade 3 shirts for 1 computer, right? Okay, how about the U.S.? Is that a good deal for us? To get 3 shirts for 1 computer? Oh my goodness, what an awesome deal it is. Because what does it cost us to get a shirt without trade? 1 computer. We only get 1 shirt for 1 computer if we don't trade, right? I mean, that's what this line says, 1-to-1. But if we do trade, then we could trade 24 computers for how many shirts? It's out of the scale here a little bit. See, so if the swapping terms are between the opportunity costs, both sides improve their consumption possibilities way, way, way over their production possibilities. See, without trade, PPF and CPF are the same, right? If you're not swapping with other people, what you produce is what you can consume. But once you specialize in trade, that's no longer a problem. Okay, well, for whatever reason, there's an advantage to this pit, because I don't look as tall in here, at least all of you. I know sort of from the past that being loud and animated and tall is kind of scary to some people. At least to those of you sitting several rows up, I don't look at least too tall. But you got to come out of the shell here. If you didn't get what was just said here, it isn't going to get any easier this semester. There's going to be more intense stuff than this. And so if you're not going to say, hey, Doc, I don't get it, please explain it, do a little more than that. Say what it is you don't get and why, if you can. Don't just say, help, Mr. Wizard, because then I won't know what it is I said that didn't work. Okay, give me a little help, but this room is about not lecturing, though that's mostly what goes on because of passivity. It's about interaction and clarification. Yes?
So I think I have my math wrong here. Correct me, where I'm getting this wrong, but, it says on the board 24 for the U.S. PPE. Then when you put our CPF, then for the CPF, we're trading the shirts for the computers. Here's what a shirt.
Yeah, okay, let me just stop you before you finish. We've established, based on comparative advantage, that Mexico has the comparative advantage of the low opportunity cost making shirts. That's why we connected the CPF and the PPF here. In the U.S., we made the opposite determination because the U.S. has a 1 shirt opportunity cost for making computers, and Mexico has a 6 shirt opportunity cost for making computers. So the U.S. has the low opportunity cost, so that's why we connect the CPF here. Okay, so continue with.
Just the math, I just want to know, how you got 72. So I know. I said the feasible swapping terms have to be between the opportunity costs, so between 6-to-1 and 1-to-1.
So I said, suppose, let's pick 3 to 1. 2 to 1 is still feasible. 4 to 1 is feasible. Both sides still gain. But for simplicity, this is principles, because it's advanced stuff to figure out exactly what the swapping terms will be. But they have to be between, in this case, 6 to 1 and 1 to 1. So say 3 to 1. Okay? So again, the rate is 3 shirts per computer. So 3 times 24 is 72. Okay? And then it's 3 shirts. So over here, I got to divide. It's 3 shirts per 1 computer. So it's 12 divided by 3 over here.
Thank you. I got it.
Yeah, well, and thank you for asking, because I guarantee you there was at least a 10 to 1 multiplier on those who needed that clarification, and then the one person, you, that sought it. Question. You're just stretching. I had my hand up. It's okay. He's pointing at me. It's all right. I see another hand up here. Please, more interaction. I know this isn't easy. Okay? I need your feedback to figure out exactly what it is that I need clarification, what needs clarified. And in the future, try to sit a little closer, because, yes. This 4? Yeah. The semi-assumed swapping terms is 3 to 1. Because it's feasible, because it's sort of halfway between 6 to 1 and 1 to 1. Okay, the 1 to 1 is the opportunity cost here. 24 divided by 24, 1 to 1. Okay, and the 6 to 1, that's this. 12 versus 2 is the same as 6 to 1, the ratio. Okay, so between 6 to 1 and 1 to 1 is 3 to 1, or 4 to 1, or 2 to 1. We pick 3 to 1. So that's the thing where we have to sort of fudge a little bit, because determining whether it'll be 2 to 1, 3 to 1, or 4 to 1, or 2.5 to 1, or something like that, that's pretty advanced stuff. So we're going to say, assume it's 3 to 1. Okay, it has to be between 6 to 1 and 1 to 1. Within that range, we pick 3 to 1. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Okay, Mexico is going to specialize in shirts, and the rate is 3 shirts per computer. So 12 computers trades for 12 shirts trades for 4 computers at a 3 to 1 rate. Same as over here, 3 to 1 rate. Now the U.S. is going to be trading the computers, so they're going to get 3 shirts for every computer. So 72 is the maximum possible. That doesn't mean they're going to have only traded all their computers away for shirts. No. That's just the most extreme possibility. Consumption possibilities, frontier. Think of the word frontier like menu. All these points are menu items. Right? One menu item is to make 24 computers and keep them. Consume those. Not a very attractive one. Unless you all want to go topless, which is feasible this time of year, but not other times of the year. Yes, question?
So when you trade, you always use a middle ratio?
Yeah, for our purposes, 3 to 1 isn't exactly halfway between 6 and 1. It's 3.5, but something in between is feasible. So, like in a multiple choice question, let's go ahead and get to those, because there's one of those here among those questions that I picked. But before we do that, make sure we answer any other questions that might not be addressed that way.
I understand what the tables are trying to explain. Like units of labor, like for Mexico is 12, and the production possibility is 2. I didn't explain.
Just remember that the 12 is based on these numbers with 24 workers. Okay? It takes 2 workers per shirt, so 12 shirts per 24 workers, and then it takes 12 workers per computer, so just two computers per 24 workers. Is that what was missing there? Okay. Yeah, I have another way that I usually do this that I'm also going to toss into the mix that doesn't force you to remember how many workers are specified. Everybody does it a little differently. Okay. Is it Dustin?
No.
Huh?
No.
Oh, oops. See, you got to take some risks, right? Same thing. I mean, you got a question, you just got to take a chance. I thought I remembered your name. I didn't. I remembered it wrong. Sorry. Tyler.
Is the comparative advantage going to always be based off of just labor itself, or would it be based off of cost of labor? So if it's one person making...
But see, this does establish what the cost of labor is. We're making assumptions about just the labor is uniform. Yeah, we're not allowing for the complexities if there's different kinds of workers.
Okay, but will we ever get to based on the price of making it versus just
This is the price of making it under very simple assumptions. The price of making a computer is how many shirts you got to give up. That is the price. That's exactly what we're talking about. Now, admittedly, we're not getting into, there's some high-paid workers and low-paid workers, and oh, by the way, there's not just labor, there's materials and other. No, we're going to assume all that away. But that is the price. Okay, what the opportunity cost is what we give up to do something, right? And so, by these numbers in Mexico, 6 shirts are given up to make a computer. That's the price. Okay? The money has piece of paper has no value other than what you can buy with it, right? And so we're saying, here's what it's going to cost our economy to make these computers is, in Mexico, 6 fewer shirts per computer. I know we're all used to thinking in terms of dollar terms, but the dollar terms sometimes mask realities. Namely, here's what doing this causes us to not be able to do. Yeah, that was important, right? We're making some simplifying assumptions, but we are talking price and cost, but price in a holistic sense, not just in terms of a price tag. Forward-looking opportunity cost, what we otherwise could have done with the same resources. The money, the price in money terms just facilitates the bookkeeping and all of that. And it will ultimately, if this was the reality, and the price tag of a computer would be 6 times in money what a shirt costs. Okay, but then in trade, what would happen? It would be only 3 times as much as a result of trade. Right, at the 3-to-1 rate we assumed. Right? Imports makes things cheaper, right? Okay, and then exports makes you sell it for more than you otherwise could have. Right, what would be the price of oil in Saudi Arabia if they couldn't export it to the rest of the world? Cheaper than water. Yeah, water's pretty expensive in Saudi Arabia, pretty dry there. But the fact is they can sell it. What's the price of oil these days? $40, $50 a barrel. A lot. And not too long ago, 100 and something a barrel. Less the frackers for all of that. By the way, in terms of oil, and remember that's sort of it's one of the interesting things about what's chapter 3 in your textbook is when they wrote this, the price of oil was rising and high. And I keep talking about what happens when the price of oil goes up. It's been going down a lot, right? Because of market entry, because of how high the price was. That very high price of over $100 a barrel, over $4 a gallon for gasoline, attracted a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship. Okay, and they discovered fracking and put it in place and found oil all over the place that they knew where a lot of the oil was. They just couldn't get it out economically under the old methods. And they said, no, let's go back to those old oil fields with fracking and get that oil out of there at a cost that we can make money on. And they did. So now gasoline is back below $3 a gallon, even though much of the world is now driving cars and consuming petroleum products that weren't before. As I said, demand globally is at an all-time high, and even though prices are down by 50% or so from recent highs. Okay, good. We had some Q&A there, and hopefully some of you that are a little shyer than others picked up what you needed from the answers for the people who did speak up. Oh, okay. I'm going to just leave that there for a minute and go over to some of these questions that I produced for Top Hat, and we need to sort of, you and I both need to, let's see, should I show or ask? Let me show first. No, these first couple are not too bad. Okay, so normally, see, this is time to get a little practice. See, it says over here on the side, if you text it in, here's what you do. Okay, you put in that number and then whatever choice A, B, C, or D that you pick is your answer to this. If you have a tablet or a laptop or something, then it's easier even than that. So I'm not going to count any of this and grading and all of that, but and even starting Tuesday, it only counts as a tiebreaker the end of the semester if I'm struggling based on the rest of the syllabus to figure out what grade to give you. You're kind of in the, as I said, the gray area. All right, so at some point I click this, and then that means time's up. And so let me try that and see what happens. And that's another question. Let me see. Oh, yes, the reports here. Okay. There we go. See, 99% answered it right, and one person didn't. Okay, so that's what we have. And do I need to say anything for the one person why they thought it was less pollution? Anyway, normally it's all because the questions are harder. There's a little more of a distribution here, and then it tells me what it is I need to work a little harder on to clarify.
Well, I didn't sign on the top half, so I was just curious, since I'm texting all these answers, are my answers being included up here?
No.
Oh, so I'm
You need to get into the top hat deal. All right, let's move on to one of the others. Let's try that one, and let's ask it. Just kind of warming up here to something that's a little harder. Letting you know what sort of hardware you're going to need and how to work with it. Plus, we do want to have the intended effect, namely engagement, clarification, information for me on what's not getting across and who thinks what might be the answer when it's not. And plus it helps you feel a little bit more kinship with, hey, I'm not getting this, but hey, a bunch of other people aren't getting it either. Maybe I won't look so foolish if I raise my hand. And of course, I mean that only because you might believe you look foolish. You don't look foolish to me. In fact, when you raise your hand, you have a substantive question, you look very wise to me. Foolish people are the ones that aren't saying anything when they need some help. All right. Okay, so let's see what we have up here for reports. Sure, no, well, 12 people thought it was a comparative advantage. So, no, it's let's go back to the question. Oops. How do I go back to the actual question? Okay, if country A is able to produce furniture at a lower cost than country B, fewer resources. Okay, now maybe you read in there lower opportunity cost. Maybe the question's a little vaguely worded. And by the way, that's one of the reasons I use this question, because I want to talk about something else for just a few seconds, and that's what I call question protest. It's not worth it on a top hat question. There's not enough value here to go through that process. But if there's a question on the test and you honestly believe that there was something in the lecture or the notes or something that justifies the answer you gave, I want you to file a question protest. Now, I'll try to remember after class to send you the little form electronically that you do that. But it's a good interactive way to learn several skills and to correct any injustices that might result from vaguely and poorly worded questions or just legitimate controversy. Okay, so that does happen from time to time. And wow, yeah, time is up. I keep forgetting what time things are going. Well, we'll get to the harder questions, 3 through 6, next time. We will finish this section next time. We will be into that supply and demand stuff that we barely snuck into last time. There is a homework assignment due this Sunday at midnight on Chapter 1. It has been posted. It is there.